The Essays by Michel de Montaigne, published in 1580, is a landmark in history. In his more than 100 texts, ranging from domestic matters to philosophical solitude, he explores the comprehension of the world. One of his most famous texts is on the education of children. Montaigne gives us a guide for the education of children, but it can be noted that this guide certainly does not apply only to children. And although written in the 16th century, it is still up to date. In fact, the conclusions and concepts are more than up to date. As we will see, they are timeless. He says, "The authority of those who wish to teach is most often harmful to those who wish to learn." From Cicero. And about the teacher, "Let the preceptor make the boy pass everything through his own scrutiny, and let him not put anything in his head by mere authority or trust." Here is a quote from ancient Roman Cicero, who had already observed what we know as authority bias. That is, we give greater value to someone's opinion because of the title they hold and not the idea itself. This has several ramifications and can be harmful. Nevertheless, it is a constant in humanity, with examples from ancient times to the present. Besides the psychological bias, there is also the authority fallacy, where a person appeals only to their occupational status or the occupational status of another person just to prove their point. This can lead to many dead ends and self-delusion. But by really passing everything through our own scrutiny, as our guide says, it is easier to protect ourselves and not fall into this error. Well, and to have a good education, it is necessary to know about various things. But it is not only about the knowledge of books. One can take lessons from everything that exists in nature and from everything that happens around us. One must explore everything and buy from each according to his merchandise. For at home everything will do, and even foolishness and weakness of others will instruct him. Everyone can be your teacher, the intelligent, the foolish, the weak, the strong. There's also a certain lesson in humbleness here, because learning from the mistakes of others, one must first be able to assume that one could make such a mistake in the same situation. One must put oneself in the other's shoes and from there extract lessons and then do differently, without having to go through the same problems. By not being afraid of authorities, by sifting through everything and learning from everything and everyone, we are on a great path. This path will inevitably lead us to some universal truth about nature. After all, nature is one and accessible to all. Truth and reason are common to all people and belong as much as to those who said it first as to those who said them later. And one thing is no more according to Plato than according to myself, for he and I understand and see alike. Throughout the ages, we see knowledge being discovered and rediscovered. There is not much that can be done since the lifespan is so short, and only a fraction of each person's knowledge can be passed on to another generation. Repeating the process for several generations, the deviation from the original idea may be great, or the original discovery may be encapsulated in other guises. And here the truths are not only those derived from the modern scientific method, which at the time of the book was only an embryo. Here the truths are moral, referring also to virtues and the way of life. Much of what we have thought, other people have thought it before us. This can be discouraging, but in fact, this can be the contrary of discouraging. It can put us alongside the greats of history. In a sense, we may be able to reach the discovery directly without any clothing or intermediaries. Montaigne cites various ancient writings and wrote much of his essays within his private library. And although he cites knowledge from books and admits to not being an expert in any specific subject, such as the parts of mathematics, which at the time included arithmetic, astronomy, and so on, he places great emphasis on the need for a physically active life. A balance between theory and practice is necessary. It is not enough to strengthen your soul, you must also harden your muscles. The soul is pressed too hard if it is not supported, and it already has too much to do to cope with two tasks alone. Yet, another truth discovered and rediscovered again and again in history. The games and exercises themselves will be a good part of this study. The running, the fighting, the music, the dancing, the hunting, the handling of horses and weapons. I want good physical conduct and social civility, and the disposition of your temperament to be molded step by step with the spirit. To someone who asked him why the Lacedaemonians did not draw up the rules of bravery in writing and give them to their young men to read, Zeuxidama replied that it was because they wanted to accustom them to facts, not words. This is especially useful today as the digital world takes more and more space in our minds. We see ourselves with real feelings for digital threats. However, this layer between the real and the digital, in my opinion, has already reached the point of no return. But even on this modern fine line, our 3.5 billion year old programming still works. That is, there are many valuable lessons from a physically active life. This active life, however, also has a limit. I don't want to corrupt your spirit by keeping you in torture and work the way others do, 14 or 15 hours a day like a porter. Again, balance. The text is not very detailed or metaphysical, but there is an important moral issue between doing good or evil for this hypothetical student, that he may do all things and only like to do the good ones. I want him in his own drunkenness to surpass in vigor and firmness his companions and to renounce doing evil, not for lack of strength or knowledge, but for lack of will. Which is better, to be born good or to overcome your evil nature through great effort? Montaigne realized that there is no great merit in doing good if that is the only option available, but there is great merit and virtue when doing good is completely voluntary. As he goes on being almost stoic, knowing to enjoy what one can out of life, yet maintaining humility. And about the student, he wishes that he would be someone who is content to correct himself and do not appear to recriminate others for all that you refuse to do, nor oppose public customs. And he says, one can be wise without pomp or arrogance. If virtue lacks common pleasure, it shuns or dispenses with it, and forges for itself another, all its own, no longer fluctuating or changeable. Know how to be rich and powerful, and wise, and sleep on musk mattresses. Love life, love beauty, glory, and health, but its proper and particular office is to know how to use these goods with moderation, and to know how to lose them with firmness, an office far nobler than arduous, without which the whole course of life is denatured, turbulent, and deformed. Love of life, virtue as a shaper of one's values. We see these themes being discussed 3 centuries later by Nietzsche. The text is timeless, a great example of rediscovered truths, dialogues with the past and the future. Now, we have an education, or a good way to get one. Get knowledge of everything possible and make use of it. To return to my purpose, there is nothing like enticing the boy's appetite and love for study. Otherwise, we only produce donkeys loaded with books that are given to keep at whips, a case full of science, which, to do any good, should not be kept at home at all. It must be put to good use. These are my lessons. It is better for him who applies them than for him who knows them. What is the purpose then of seeking knowledge? In a way, it is to obtain the peace and tranquility that lack of knowledge brings in the form of doubt, conflicts, and difficulties. By knowing things, it is possible to have a good idea what may happen in the future, to know what has already happened in the past, and even more importantly, to know how to live in the present. Wisdom allows one to deeply understand the nature of the moment, its rarity and preciousness and ramifications, so that being in it is comforting. After all this effort, this struggle, this strengthening of our body and mind, we can be wise and know. The most expressive mark of wisdom is a constant rejoicing. Its state is like that of things above the moon, always serene.